Get ready for an intense and gripping journey with Storytime Audio. In today's story, Beneath the Surface, Unveiling the Betrayal of a Cheating Wife, we delve into the life of Ethan and his wife, Megan. What begins as a picturesque new chapter in their dream home quickly turns into a nightmare of deception and danger. Ethan's world is shattered by an unexpected fall down the stairs, leading to a cascade of shocking revelations. As he fights to recover, Ethan must confront the painful truth about his wife's betrayal and unravel a conspiracy that goes deeper than he ever imagined. Stay tuned as we uncover every twist and turn in this unforgettable tale of love, deceit, and resilience. In the summer of 2022, Ethan and his wife Megan had just settled into their new home in Austin, Texas. It was a charming two-story house in a quiet neighborhood, a perfect place for them to start the next chapter of their lives. They had spent months planning, packing, and finally moving into this house, excited about the new beginnings it symbolized. Little did they know, it would soon become the scene of a life-altering event. It was a sunny afternoon, and Ethan was working in his home office on the upper floor. The room was still sparsely furnished, with only a desk, a chair, and a few scattered boxes yet to be unpacked. He was deeply engrossed in his work, trying to meet a looming deadline for a project that had been stressing him out for weeks. The air conditioner hummed softly, providing a stark contrast to the intense heat outside. Megan was downstairs, preparing lunch. The aroma of grilled cheese sandwiches filled the house, a familiar comfort on a hectic day. She was humming to herself, content in their new home, when suddenly, a loud thud interrupted the peaceful atmosphere. "Ethan?" Megan called out, her voice laced with concern. There was no response. Her heart skipped a beat, and she immediately rushed towards the staircase. What she saw made her blood run cold. Ethan was lying motionless at the bottom of the stairs, his body twisted in an unnatural position. Panic surged through her as she ran down the stairs, dropping to her knees beside him. "Ethan, Ethan, can you hear me?" she shouted, her voice trembling. Ethan's eyes fluttered open, but he couldn't focus. Pain radiated through his entire body, and he couldn't make sense of what had just happened. His head felt like it was splitting open, and his vision was blurred. He tried to speak, but the words wouldn't come out. Megan's hands shook as she pulled out her phone and dialed 911. "My husband fell down the stairs. He's hurt really bad. Please, you have to send an ambulance right away," she pleaded with the operator, trying to keep her voice steady. The minutes that followed felt like an eternity. Megan stayed by Ethan's side, holding his hand and trying to keep him conscious. "Stay with me, Ethan. Help is on the way," she whispered, her voice cracking. When the paramedics arrived, they quickly assessed the situation. Ethan was semi-conscious and in obvious distress. They carefully placed him on a stretcher, securing his neck to prevent further injury. Megan watched helplessly as they loaded him into the ambulance, her heart pounding in her chest. The ride to the hospital was a blur for Ethan. He drifted in and out of consciousness, the sirens wailing in the background. His mind was a fog of pain and confusion, unable to process what had happened. Megan sat beside him, clutching his hand, praying silently for him to be okay. At the hospital, a team of doctors and nurses took over. Ethan was rushed into the emergency room, where they conducted a series of tests and scans to determine the extent of his injuries. Megan was left in the waiting room, pacing back and forth, her mind racing with worst-case scenarios. After what felt like an eternity, a doctor finally approached her. "Mrs. Taylor?" he asked gently. Megan nodded, her eyes wide with fear. "Is he going to be okay?" The doctor sighed, glancing at the chart in his hands. "Your husband has suffered a severe concussion, and he has multiple fractures. His left arm is broken in 2 places, and there is significant swelling around his brain. We're going to do everything we can, but it's going to be a tough recovery." Megan felt a wave of relief mixed with fear. At least he was alive, but the road ahead sounded daunting. "Can I see him?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. "Yes, but he's still unconscious. We're monitoring him closely," the doctor replied, leading her to Ethan's room. Seeing Ethan lying there, hooked up to machines and IVs, was almost too much for Megan to bear. She sat down beside his bed, taking his hand in hers. "I'm here, Ethan. I'm right here," she whispered, fighting back tears. Days passed, and Ethan remained in a state of semi-consciousness. The doctors continued to monitor him, performing regular scans to check for any changes in the swelling around his brain. Megan stayed by his side, refusing to leave the hospital. She slept in a chair next to his bed, waking up every time a nurse came in to check his vitals. One afternoon, as Megan dozed off in the chair, she heard a faint groan. She jolted awake, her heart racing. Ethan's eyes were open, and he was looking around the room, confused. "Ethan, can you hear me?" Megan asked, leaning forward. Ethan's eyes met hers, but there was no recognition in them. He tried to speak, but only a weak, raspy sound came out. Megan's heart sank. The doctors had warned her that he might have some cognitive difficulties as a result of the concussion. "It's okay, Ethan. You're in the hospital. You had an accident, but you're going to be okay," Megan said softly, hoping her words would bring him some comfort. Ethan closed his eyes, trying to make sense of everything. The pain in his head was excruciating, and every movement sent sharp jolts through his body. He felt like he was trapped in a nightmare, unable to escape the pain and confusion. Over the next few days, Ethan's condition slowly improved. He was able to stay awake for longer periods and started to recognize Megan. The doctors were cautiously optimistic, but they warned Megan that his recovery would be slow and challenging. Ethan's first clear memory was of waking up to find Megan holding his hand, her eyes red from crying. "Hey," he croaked, his voice barely audible. Megan's face lit up with relief. "Hey, yourself," she replied, squeezing his hand gently. "How are you feeling?" Ethan tried to smile, but it turned into a grimace. "Like I got hit by a truck," he said, his voice still weak. Megan let out a shaky laugh. "Well, you did take quite a tumble. But you're going to be okay. The doctors say you're making good progress." Ethan nodded slightly, wincing at the pain in his neck. "What happened?" "You fell down the stairs," Megan explained, her voice trembling slightly. "I found you at the bottom, and you were unconscious. It was so scary, Ethan. I thought I lost you." Ethan reached out to touch her face, his hand shaking. "I'm sorry I scared you," he whispered. Megan covered his hand with hers, tears streaming down her face. "Just promise me you'll get better. I need you, Ethan." "I'll try," Ethan replied, his eyes closing as exhaustion took over. As the days turned into weeks, Ethan's recovery continued. He underwent physical therapy to help regain strength and mobility, and he worked with a neurologist to address the cognitive issues caused by the concussion. It was a slow and often frustrating process, but Megan was by his side every step of the way. The accident had left Ethan with a newfound appreciation for life and the people he loved. He realized how fragile life could be and how quickly everything could change. With Megan's unwavering support, he was determined to overcome the challenges and rebuild his life. In the quiet moments when the pain and frustration threatened to overwhelm him, Ethan would look at Megan and remember why he was fighting so hard. She had been his rock throughout this ordeal, and he was determined to come out of it stronger than ever. As Ethan lay in his hospital bed, reflecting on the events that had brought him here, he couldn't shake the feeling that there was more to the accident than just a simple fall. His memories of that day were still hazy, but something didn't feel right. He knew he had to get to the bottom of it, not just for his own peace of mind, but for Megan's as well. Little did he know, the answers he sought would lead him down a path he never could have imagined, uncovering secrets that would change his life forever. Ethan lay in his hospital bed, his body still racked with pain and his mind struggling to piece together the fragments of that fateful day. The antiseptic smell of the hospital filled his nostrils, and the rhythmic beeping of the heart monitor became a constant background noise. His room was dimly lit, with sunlight filtering through the blinds, casting soft shadows on the walls. Megan was sitting in the corner, her eyes red and puffy from lack of sleep and worry. On July 12, 2022, Ethan's semi-conscious state made him more sensitive to the sounds around him. The hushed voices of doctors and nurses drifted through the partially closed door, snippets of conversation filtering into his awareness. "How's Mr. Taylor doing?" a nurse asked. "He's stable for now," a doctor replied. "But the concussion is severe, and the fractures are going to take time to heal. We need to keep a close eye on the swelling in his brain." Ethan winced as he tried to move, his left arm encased in a heavy cast. He vaguely remembered the fall, the sensation of weightlessness followed by the brutal impact as he hit the floor. But beyond that, his memories were a blur of pain and confusion. Megan noticed his discomfort and rushed to his side. "Ethan, try not to move too much," she said gently, placing a hand on his shoulder. "The doctors are doing everything they can." Ethan nodded slightly, closing his eyes to block out the pain. His thoughts were interrupted by the sound of footsteps approaching his room. He heard the door creak open and the soft murmur of voices as two men entered. "Mrs. Taylor?" one of the men said. Megan turned to face them, her expression wary. "Yes? I'm Detective Harris, and this is my partner, Detective Lewis. We need to ask you a few questions about the incident," the man said, his voice professional but tinged with sympathy. "Of course," Megan replied, glancing at Ethan. "But can it wait? My husband is still recovering." "We understand, ma'am, and we'll be brief," Detective Harris assured her. "We just need to gather some information to help with our investigation." Ethan's curiosity was piqued. He strained to listen as the detectives began their questioning. "Can you tell us what happened on the day of the accident?" Detective Harris asked. Megan took a deep breath, her eyes filled with a mixture of fear and determination. Ethan was working upstairs in his office. "I was downstairs making lunch when I heard a loud thud. I rushed to the stairs and found him lying at the bottom, unconscious." "Did you notice anything unusual before the fall?" Detective Lewis inquired. Megan shook her head. "No, everything seemed normal. He didn't mention feeling dizzy or unwell. It all happened so suddenly." Ethan's mind raced as he listened to Megan's account. He tried to recall the moments leading up to the fall, but the details remained frustratingly out of reach. The detectives continued their questioning, focusing on the injuries Ethan had sustained. "Mr. Taylor has several fractures, including his left arm, and a severe concussion," Detective Harris said, flipping through his notes. "There are also some scratches and bruises on his forearm. Do you know how he might have gotten those?" Megan looked puzzled. I don't know. Maybe from the fall? The staircase is wooden, and there are some sharp edges." The detectives exchanged a glance. "It's possible," Detective Lewis said, "but we need to consider all possibilities." "Were there any witnesses?" Megan shook her head again. "No, it was just the two of us at home. I called 911 as soon as I found him." "Thank you, Mrs. Taylor," Detective Harris said, his tone softening. "We appreciate your cooperation. If you remember anything else, please don't hesitate to contact us." As the detectives turned to leave, Ethan mustered the strength to speak. "Detective," he croaked, his voice barely above a whisper. Both detectives turned back, surprised to hear him. "Yes, Mr. Taylor?" Detective Harris responded. I can't remember much," Ethan said, struggling to form coherent thoughts. "But something doesn't feel right. I don't think it was just a fall." The detectives exchanged another glance, this time with a hint of intrigue. "We'll look into it, Mr. Taylor," Detective Lewis said. "Get some rest. We'll be in touch." After the detectives left, Megan returned to Ethan's side, her eyes filled with worry. "Ethan, what do you mean? What doesn't feel right?" Ethan shook his head slowly, wincing at the pain. "I don't know, Megan. It's just a feeling. Maybe I'm wrong, but something's off." Megan squeezed his hand, her expression determined. "We'll figure it out, Ethan. Just focus on getting better." Over the next few days, Ethan's condition slowly improved. The swelling in his brain began to subside, and he was able to stay awake for longer periods. The doctors continued to monitor him closely, performing regular scans and tests to ensure his recovery was on track. Despite the physical pain, Ethan's mind remained sharp. He couldn't shake the nagging suspicion that there was more to his accident than met the eye. He spent hours replaying the events in his mind, trying to piece together the fragments of his memory. One afternoon, as Ethan lay in bed, he overheard another conversation outside his room. This time, it was the doctors discussing his case with the detectives. "We've reviewed the MRI and X-rays," a doctor was saying. "There are no signs of any underlying medical conditions that could have caused the fall. His injuries are consistent with a traumatic impact." "What about the scratches on his forearm?" Detective Harris asked. "They could have been caused by the fall, but the pattern is unusual," the doctor replied. "It's possible he tried to break his fall or grabbed onto something on the way down." Ethan's mind raced as he listened. The pieces were starting to come together, but there were still gaps in his memory. He needed to know what had really happened that day. Determined to uncover the truth, Ethan decided to speak with the detectives again. When they visited his room later that day, he asked them to sit down. "I need to know what you're thinking," Ethan said, his voice stronger than before. Do you believe this was an accident? Detective Harris hesitated, glancing at his partner. We're considering all possibilities, Mr. Taylor. Right now, we don't have enough evidence to draw any conclusions. But you have doubts, Ethan pressed. Detective Lewis nodded. Yes, we do. There are some inconsistencies that we need to investigate further. Ethan took a deep breath, steeling himself for what he was about to say. I want to help. I need to know what happened to me. The detectives exchanged a look of respect. All right, Mr. Taylor, Detective Harris said. We'll keep you informed, but for now, focus on your recovery. We'll handle the investigation. Ethan nodded, grateful for their support. As the detectives left, he turned to Megan, who had been listening quietly. We're going to get to the bottom of this, Megan, Ethan said, his voice filled with determination. I won't rest until we know the truth. Megan nodded, her eyes shining with resolve. We'll do it together, Ethan. No matter what it takes. With Megan by his side and the detectives on the case, Ethan felt a renewed sense of hope. The road to recovery would be long and difficult, but he was ready to face whatever challenges lay ahead. As he closed his eyes and drifted off to sleep, he knew that the truth was out there, waiting to be uncovered. And he wouldn't stop until he found it. As Ethan lay in his hospital bed, the memories of the days leading up to his accident began to resurface. The more he thought about it, the clearer the picture became. It was early in 2022, a few months after they had moved into their new home. Megan had been acting differently, and Ethan couldn't quite put his finger on what was bothering him. She seemed distracted, often lost in thought, and there were moments when she would be overly protective of her phone. One morning, while Megan was in the shower, Ethan was in their bedroom, getting dressed for the day. As he buttoned his shirt, he noticed Megan's phone vibrating on the dressing table. He glanced at the screen and saw a message notification. It wasn't the first time he had seen such messages, but something about this one caught his attention. The message preview read, "Can't wait to see you tonight, babe." Ethan's heart skipped a beat. He knew he shouldn't invade Megan's privacy, but his curiosity got the better of him. He picked up the phone and unlocked it, entering the passcode he had seen Megan use countless times. The message was from Kevin, Megan's boss. Hey babe, can't wait to see you tonight. Last night was amazing. XX. Ethan's hands trembled as he scrolled through the message thread. It was filled with intimate exchanges, plans for secret meetings, and explicit content that left no doubt about the nature of their relationship. His mind raced, a whirlwind of emotions threatening to overwhelm him. Betrayal, anger, and heartbreak all mingled together as he tried to process what he had just discovered. Megan's voice interrupted his thoughts. Ethan, have you seen my phone? She called from the bathroom. Ethan quickly placed the phone back on the dressing table and tried to compose himself. Yeah, it's right here, he replied, his voice strained. Megan stepped out of the bathroom, wrapped in a towel, and grabbed her phone. She didn't seem to notice the change in Ethan's demeanor as she continued getting ready for work. Ethan, on the other hand, felt like his world had just crumbled beneath him. Over the next few days, Ethan observed Megan closely, his suspicions growing with each passing moment. He noticed how she would quickly hide her phone when he entered the room, or how she would step outside to take certain calls. The pieces of the puzzle were slowly coming together, and Ethan realized he needed more concrete evidence before confronting her. He decided to investigate further. Late one night, while Megan was asleep, Ethan accessed her phone again and forwarded the incriminating messages to his own email. He felt a pang of guilt for violating her privacy, but he needed to know the truth. He also installed a tracking app on her phone, something he never thought he would resort to, but desperation drove him to do whatever it took to uncover the extent of her betrayal. The next few weeks were agonizing for Ethan. He followed Megan's movements through the tracking app, noting her frequent visits to Kevin's apartment and the late-night rendezvous that she tried to disguise as work meetings. He listened to their conversations, recorded through the app, each one a dagger to his heart. One evening, while Megan was out, working late, Ethan sat alone in their living room, the evidence laid out before him. He felt sick to his stomach, a cold rage building within him. He knew he couldn't continue living like this, pretending everything was fine while his marriage fell apart. He needed to confront Megan and put an end to the lies. The opportunity came sooner than he expected. Megan had left her phone on the kitchen counter while she went upstairs to change. It buzzed with a new message, and Ethan couldn't resist the urge to look. It was from Kevin again. Tonight was incredible. I can't stop thinking about you. Same time tomorrow? Ethan's hands shook as he read the message. He knew he couldn't wait any longer. He had to confront her now. He heard Megan coming down the stairs and braced himself for the confrontation. Megan, we need to talk, he said, his voice trembling with anger. Megan looked surprised. What is it, Ethan? He held up her phone, the message from Kevin still on the screen. I know about you and Kevin. I know everything. Megan's face went pale, and she stumbled back, her eyes wide with shock and fear. Ethan, I can explain. Explain what? Ethan snapped, his voice rising. Explain how you've been lying to me. How you've been sneaking around behind my back with your boss. Tears welled up in Megan's eyes. It's not what you think, Ethan. Please, just let me explain. Ethan shook his head, the pain and betrayal evident on his face. I don't want to hear your excuses, Megan. You've broken my trust, and I don't know if I can ever forgive you for that. Megan broke down, sobbing uncontrollably. I'm so sorry, Ethan. I never meant for this to happen. It just got out of control. Ethan felt a mixture of anger and pity as he watched her cry. He knew this was the end of their marriage, the end of everything they had built together. But he couldn't ignore the betrayal, couldn't pretend that everything was okay. I need some time to think, Ethan said quietly, his voice filled with pain. I don't know what happens next, but I need you to leave. I can't be around you right now. Megan nodded, wiping away her tears. I'll go. I'm so sorry, Ethan. I love you. Ethan turned away, unable to look at her. Just go, Megan, please. As Megan packed a bag and left the house, Ethan sat down on the couch, his mind numb. The reality of the situation was sinking in, and he felt a crushing weight on his chest. He had loved Megan deeply, trusted her completely, and now everything was shattered. In the days that followed, Ethan tried to come to terms with what had happened. He threw himself into his work, trying to distract himself from the pain. But the memories of Megan and Kevin haunted him, and he couldn't shake the feeling of betrayal. One evening, as he sat alone in their empty house, Ethan received a call from an unknown number. He hesitated for a moment before answering. Hello? Ethan, it's Detective Harris. I hope I'm not disturbing you. Ethan sat up, his heart racing. No, it's fine. What is it, Detective? We've been investigating your case, and we have some information that might be of interest to you, Detective Harris said. Can we meet tomorrow to discuss it? Ethan agreed, a sense of foreboding settling over him. He had a feeling that whatever the detective had to say would change everything once again. As he hung up the phone, he couldn't help but wonder what new revelations awaited him. Ethan had spent days grappling with the betrayal, trying to make sense of his emotions and figure out his next steps. The discovery of Megan's affair with Kevin had left him shattered, but he knew that he couldn't avoid confronting them forever. The day of reckoning had arrived. On the morning of June 1, 2022, Ethan woke up with a sense of determination. He had planned everything meticulously. Megan believed he would be out of town for a business trip, but instead, Ethan was going to confront the two people who had shattered his world. He left the house early, pretending to head to the airport. Instead, he drove around Austin, trying to calm his nerves. He parked his car a few blocks away from his house and waited, his heart pounding in his chest. He checked his phone repeatedly, watching the minutes tick by, until he finally saw Megan's car pull into the driveway. Not long after, Kevin's car followed. Ethan's hands trembled as he gripped the steering wheel, fighting back the anger and pain that threatened to consume him. He took a deep breath, steeling himself for what he was about to do. He exited the car and walked briskly towards his house, his mind focused on the confrontation ahead. He reached the front door and hesitated for a moment, his hand hovering over the handle. This was it. He took another deep breath and turned the knob, pushing the door open. The familiar creak of the door echoed through the house, and Ethan stepped inside, his heart pounding. The sound of laughter reached his ears, and he followed it to the living room. There, he saw Megan and Kevin on the couch, sitting close together, their bodies intertwined. The sight made Ethan's blood boil, but he forced himself to stay calm. Megan, Kevin, Ethan's voice was cold and steady, surprising even himself. Both Megan and Kevin jumped, their faces turning pale as they saw Ethan standing in the doorway. Megan's eyes widened in shock and fear, while Kevin's expression quickly turned to one of defiance. Ethan, what are you doing here? Megan stammered, her voice trembling. Ethan stepped further into the room, his gaze fixed on the two of them. "I could ask you the same thing, Megan. But I think we both know the answer." Kevin stood up, his posture tense. "Ethan, this isn't what it looks like." Ethan laughed bitterly. "Isn't it? Because it looks like my wife and her boss have been sneaking around behind my back, lying to me, and betraying me in my own home." Megan stood up as well, tears welling up in her eyes. "Ethan, please, let me explain." Ethan held up a hand, silencing her. "I don't want to hear your excuses, Megan. I saw the messages. I know everything." Kevin stepped forward, trying to take control of the situation. "Ethan, let's be rational about this. Megan and we never meant for it to go this far." Ethan's eyes blazed with anger. "Rational? You want me to be rational? You've been sleeping with my wife, Kevin. You've both lied to me, made a fool out of me. And now you want me to be rational?" Kevin took a step back, clearly intimidated by Ethan's fury. Megan reached out, trying to touch Ethan's arm, but he pulled away. "Ethan, I love you. I never meant to hurt you," Megan said, her voice breaking. Ethan shook his head, tears of anger and pain filling his eyes. "Love? If you loved me, you wouldn't have done this. You wouldn't have betrayed me with him." Megan started to sob, her shoulders shaking. "I'm so sorry, Ethan. I made a terrible mistake." Kevin looked down, unable to meet Ethan's gaze. "Ethan, I'm sorry too. I let things get out of hand." Ethan took a deep breath, trying to regain control of his emotions. "I don't care about your apologies. The damage is done. I want you both out of my house. Now." Megan's eyes widened in panic. "Ethan, please, don't do this. We can work through this." Ethan shook his head, his resolve hardening. "No, Megan. There's no going back from this. You made your choices, and now you have to live with the consequences." Kevin put a hand on Megan's shoulder, guiding her towards the door. "Come on, Megan, let's go." As they walked past Ethan, Megan turned to him, her eyes pleading. "Ethan, please. I love you. Don't throw everything away." Ethan's heart ached, but he knew what he had to do. "Goodbye, Megan." With that, he watched as they left the house, the door closing behind them. The silence that followed was deafening. Ethan stood there for a moment, trying to process everything that had happened. He felt a strange mixture of relief and sorrow, knowing that he had taken the first step towards healing, but also realizing that his life would never be the same. He walked over to the couch where Megan and Kevin had been sitting, the place where they had betrayed him. He sat down, burying his face in his hands. The weight of the betrayal crashed down on him, and he finally allowed himself to cry. He cried for the love he had lost, for the trust that had been broken, and for the future that had been stolen from him. But as the tears fell, he also felt a spark of determination. He knew he couldn't let this destroy him. He had to rebuild his life, piece by piece. And he would do it, not just for himself, but to prove that he was stronger than the pain they had caused him. Ethan took a deep breath, wiping away his tears. He stood up, his resolve solidifying. This was just the beginning. He would face the challenges ahead with strength and courage. He would uncover the truth, heal from the hurt, and move forward with his life. As he looked around the empty house, he felt a sense of empowerment. This was his home, his life, and he would reclaim it. No matter how difficult the journey, he knew he was ready to take the next step. The days following the confrontation were a whirlwind of emotions and legal proceedings for Ethan. The confrontation with Megan and Kevin had been the catalyst for a series of events that would turn his life upside down. After Ethan threw Megan and Kevin out of his house, he called Detective Harris and told him everything. The detectives were quick to act, sensing that there was more to the story than just an affair. They arrived at Ethan's house to collect evidence and take his statement. "Mr. Taylor, we need to gather as much information as possible," Detective Harris said. "We'll start by examining your home and collecting any physical evidence. Can you walk us through what happened?" Ethan recounted the events leading up to the confrontation, including the discovery of the affair and the messages he had found on Megan's phone. The detectives listened intently, taking notes and asking clarifying questions. As they moved through the house, Detective Lewis collected fingerprints and took photographs of the scene. They also retrieved Megan's phone, which Ethan had kept, and began the process of analyzing its contents for additional evidence. The detectives' investigation extended beyond Ethan's home. They interviewed neighbors and potential witnesses who might have seen or heard anything suspicious. Cheryl, the neighbor who had helped Ethan after his fall, was one of the key witnesses. I heard a loud crash and ran over to see what had happened, Cheryl explained to the detectives. When I got there, Ethan was lying at the bottom of the stairs, unconscious. Megan and Kevin were acting strange, like they were hiding something. Her testimony, combined with the physical evidence, painted a troubling picture. The detectives also obtained security camera footage from a neighbor's house across the street, which captured Megan and Kevin arriving at Ethan's home on the day of the confrontation. The digital forensic team analyzed the contents of Megan's phone, uncovering a trove of incriminating messages and photos that detailed the extent of her relationship with Kevin. They found evidence of premeditation, suggesting that Kevin had planned to confront Ethan and possibly harm him to keep the affair secret. With the mounting evidence, the detectives felt confident in moving forward with charges. On June 15, 2022, Kevin was arrested at his office and charged with attempted murder. Megan was also taken into custody and charged with being an accessory to the crime. Ethan, we have enough to proceed with the charges, Detective Harris informed him. Kevin is being charged with attempted murder, and Megan is being charged as an accessory. We believe they conspired together, and their actions resulted in your injuries. Ethan felt a mixture of relief and sorrow. The people he had trusted had not only betrayed him but had also put his life in danger. The legal process was just beginning, and he knew there would be many difficult days ahead. As the legal proceedings began, Ethan had to face the harsh realities of his new life. He filed for divorce from Megan, a painful but necessary step. The betrayal and the events that followed had shattered any chance of reconciliation. The divorce proceedings were contentious, with Megan initially denying any wrongdoing and trying to deflect blame onto Ethan. Megan, we both know what you did, Ethan said during one of their tense meetings with their respective lawyers. You betrayed me, and you put my life in danger. I can't ever trust you again. Megan's lawyer tried to negotiate a settlement, but Ethan was determined to get what he deserved. I want the house, and I want compensation for my medical bills and the emotional trauma, he stated firmly. In the end, the divorce was finalized with Ethan retaining the house and receiving a financial settlement. Megan moved out, her reputation in ruins. She lost her job and struggled to rebuild her life. Ethan's ordeal wasn't just legal and financial, it was deeply psychological. The betrayal had left him with scars that were not visible but were incredibly painful. He struggled with trust issues, anxiety, and depression. He started seeing a therapist, Dr. Linda Evans, who specialized in trauma and betrayal. Ethan, it's important to acknowledge your feelings and work through them, Dr. Evans said during one of their sessions. What you experienced was a profound betrayal, and it's natural to feel lost and hurt. Ethan found solace in therapy, slowly beginning to understand and process his emotions. He also joined a support group for people who had experienced infidelity and betrayal. Sharing his story with others who had gone through similar experiences helped him feel less alone. Despite the emotional turmoil, Ethan was determined to rebuild his life. He reconnected with friends and family, who offered their unwavering support. His brother, Mike, and his sister, Rachel, were especially supportive, helping him through the darkest days. Ethan, we're here for you, Mike said one evening as they sat together, reminiscing about happier times. You're strong, and you'll get through this. Ethan also focused on his career, channeling his energy into his work. He received a promotion at his job, which boosted his confidence and gave him a renewed sense of purpose. Slowly but surely, Ethan began to heal. He realized that while the betrayal had changed him, it had also made him stronger. He learned to trust again, though he was more cautious and discerning. The road to recovery was long and fraught with challenges, but Ethan faced it with resilience and determination. He knew that he would never forget the pain he had endured, but he also knew that he had the strength to overcome it and build a new, fulfilling life. As he stood on the porch of his home, looking out at the sunset, Ethan felt a sense of peace. He had faced the darkness and come out the other side, stronger and wiser. The future was uncertain, but for the first time in a long while, he felt hopeful. As the summer turned to fall, the legal proceedings against Kevin and Megan began in earnest. The courtroom was a tense arena where Ethan had to relive the trauma of his betrayal and the subsequent attack. The prosecution presented a compelling case, backed by the mountain of evidence gathered by the detectives. Kevin's trial for attempted murder was the first to commence. The courtroom was packed with spectators, journalists, and supporters of both Ethan and Kevin. Ethan sat quietly, his heart pounding as he listened to the details of the case being laid out. The prosecution painted a damning picture of Kevin as a manipulative and dangerous individual who had not only engaged in an illicit affair with Megan but had also conspired to harm Ethan to keep their secret. The messages between Kevin and Megan, the security footage, and the testimonies of witnesses like Cheryl all played a crucial role in building the case against him. Kevin's defense tried to argue that the incident was a tragic accident, that he had not intended to harm Ethan. But the evidence was overwhelming, and the jury was not swayed. After weeks of testimony and deliberation, the verdict was announced. Kevin was found guilty of attempted murder. The judge sentenced Kevin to 15 years in prison, a decision that brought a sense of justice to Ethan. As Kevin was led away in handcuffs, Ethan felt a weight lift off his shoulders. The man who had betrayed him and tried to take his life was finally facing the consequences of his actions. Megan's trial followed shortly after. Charged as an accessory to attempted murder, she faced a different set of accusations. The prosecution argued that Megan had been complicit in Kevin's actions, that she had known about his intentions and had done nothing to stop him. Her defense claimed that she had been manipulated by Kevin, that she was a victim as much as Ethan was. The courtroom drama was intense, with Megan breaking down in tears multiple times. Ethan watched silently, conflicted emotions swirling within him. Despite everything, a part of him still felt pity for Megan, but he couldn't ignore the pain she had caused. In the end, the jury found Megan guilty of being an accessory to attempted murder. She was sentenced to 5 years in prison. As she was escorted out of the courtroom, Megan turned to Ethan, her eyes filled with remorse. "I'm sorry," she mouthed, but Ethan couldn't find it in himself to respond. The wounds were too deep. With the trials behind him, Ethan focused on rebuilding his life. The sense of closure from the legal proceedings allowed him to finally start healing. He threw himself into his work, finding solace in the routine and the sense of accomplishment it brought. Ethan also continued his therapy sessions with Dr. Linda Evans. "It's important to remember that healing is a process," she told him during one session. "You've been through a lot, and it's okay to take things one step at a time." Her words resonated with Ethan, and he began to embrace the idea of gradual healing. He joined a support group for survivors of trauma and betrayal, where he met others who had gone through similar experiences. Sharing his story and listening to theirs helped him feel less alone. As the weeks turned into months, Ethan found himself growing closer to Lisa, the neighbor who had been there for him since the beginning. Lisa was a nurse, compassionate and understanding, and she had been a constant source of support during his recovery. One evening, as they sat on Ethan's porch watching the sunset, Lisa turned to him with a gentle smile. "You've come a long way, Ethan. I'm really proud of you." Ethan looked at her, gratitude and affection in his eyes. "I couldn't have done it without you, Lisa. You've been my rock through all of this." Lisa reached out and took his hand. "And I'll continue to be here for you, whatever comes next." Their relationship blossomed naturally, built on mutual respect and understanding. Ethan found himself falling for Lisa, her kindness and strength a balm to his wounded heart. They spent more time together, sharing laughter and moments of quiet companionship. One night, as they walked along the lake near his house, Ethan stopped and turned to Lisa. "Lisa, I know we've both been through a lot, but I want you to know how much you mean to me. You've helped me find myself again, and I can't imagine my life without you." Lisa smiled, her eyes glistening with tears. "I feel the same way, Ethan. You've become such an important part of my life, and I'm so grateful for you." Ethan leaned in and kissed her, a kiss that felt like a promise of a new beginning. In Lisa, he had found not just a friend and a confidant, but a partner who understood his pain and shared his hopes for the future. Ethan's journey to rebuild his life was not without its challenges. There were days when the memories of the betrayal and the attack haunted him, when the pain felt fresh and raw. But with Lisa by his side and the support of his friends and family, he found the strength to keep moving forward. He redecorated his house, turning it into a space that reflected his new beginning. The living room, once a place of painful memories, was transformed into a cozy haven where he and Lisa spent many evenings talking and dreaming about the future. Ethan also reconnected with hobbies he had once enjoyed but had abandoned during the turmoil of his marriage. He took up painting again, finding peace and expression in the strokes of his brush. He joined a local hiking group, rediscovering the joy of being outdoors and the healing power of nature. Through it all, Ethan remained committed to his own well-being. He continued therapy, worked on his physical health, and embraced a balanced lifestyle that included time for relaxation and self-care. As the year drew to a close, Ethan looked back on his journey with a sense of accomplishment. He had faced betrayal, danger, and heartbreak, but he had emerged stronger and more resilient. He had found love and support in Lisa, rebuilt his life, and discovered a deeper understanding of himself. On New Year's Eve, Ethan and Lisa stood together on his porch, watching the fireworks light up the sky. As the clock struck midnight, Ethan turned to Lisa, his heart full of hope and gratitude. "Happy New Year, Lisa," he said, pulling her into an embrace. "Happy New Year, Ethan," Lisa replied, her voice filled with warmth. As they stood there, holding each other, Ethan knew that the future was bright. He had faced the darkness and found the light, and he was ready to embrace whatever came next with courage and love. You've just heard the incredible journey of Ethan in Beneath the Surface, Unveiling the Betrayal of a Cheating Wife. From the depths of betrayal to the heights of resilience, Ethan's story is a testament to the power of determination and the human spirit. As he faced unimaginable challenges and uncovered shocking truths, he found the strength to rebuild his life and discover a renewed sense of purpose and love. We hope this story resonated with you, showcasing how even in the darkest times, there is always hope for a brighter future. If you enjoyed this story, don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe to Storytime Audio for more captivating tales. Thank you for joining us, and stay tuned for more stories that will move your heart and inspire your soul.